love good water. Grew up in the mountains. And I am also leading into the fact that I'm a skier. And I have very little capacity and very little interest in a lot of other sports beyond what other people's interests are in them, which I share. So my son, my oldest son, is a basketball fan. Years ago, he introduced me to Kobe, which is a very good player. But I had, after a very brief introduction to LeBron James, I had a great appreciation of LeBron James. I just thought this man was a really good man. And he had some difficulties initially in his, at least at the time I was introduced to him. He has what is called the chief feature of fear. And that makes it hard for him to feel like he's done enough for other people, or even for himself, but more so for other people. If he hasn't been able to take care of other people or do enough to make them happy, make them feel rightly connected to him, so many things, then he feels bad himself. So he works very hard to be liked in a way. Although it's more than that, because he's afraid of not being liked. But it's not that simple. In any case, he has what is called the chief feature of fear. So it was partly responsible for him not closing his games as well as he could. And at the time he was with the Heat was when I really first started to watch him. I would talk with Billy about that. I said, as soon as he gets past this fear, he's going to do even more amazing things than he's already done. And so we watched his games, and I became more appreciative of this man as the years went by. And so I know most people that like sports know what happened in this last NBA final. And I was just thinking, for this man to have this much talent and be this good a man, to have the kind of luck where your own teammate, not intentionally, but by circumstance, happens to go the wrong way with the ball at a game-winning point opportunity, I think that's pretty difficult to deal with when you have that much in your favor. And then how are you going to justify that to other people? How do you justify that to make it okay? Because LeBron would want it to somehow be okay. How is he going to do that? He's not going to be able to. So he has to just take it inside as much as he can and go on. But why this is interesting to us, or in part interesting to us, is because we study an ancient body of knowledge. We call it foundation knowledge. It was introduced to the West, in part certainly, years ago by a man named George Gurdjieff. And there are many others, and Gurdjieff had a lot of people he got in touch with. So this system knowledge, this body of knowledge, it's very old, and it's very flexible in many ways. It's been used in many, many different venues over the years. So we also use it here, and not just in the home per se, but in general, because whatever we know about ourselves and the world in which we live, there is always more, in a sense, that we don't know. So if we can pursue or add to our knowledge something that does not take away from existing knowledge, and in many ways actually augments it, then it's beneficial to us. And so in my early studies of esotericism, I thought that what had the most value was not just what was valuable to me, but what was most likely, or most knowledge that was most capable of being transferred to other people. If it wasn't, if knowledge cannot be transferred from one person to another, then its utility is minimal. So there must be some way to pass on knowledge that's easier for people. So in this large body of knowledge that Gurdjieff brought out, I selected 4 parts that were the most transferable parts in my view. And those are body type, alchemy, center of focus or center of gravity, and chief feature or what we call chief weakness. So everybody has these in the same way everybody's subject to gravity and electromagnetism. We're all subject to type. It doesn't matter. We can accept it or not. It's not going to go away. It's been there. People have known about it for thousands and thousands of years. And its utility now is just as great as it's always been because it is human knowledge. So we really want it if we can get it. Most of the time it's difficult to get because people that know this, have this knowledge, don't usually pass it on much, certainly not to general audiences because there's some need to have preparation for it and so on. But I have felt that I should be able to live just a normal life like anyone else. And in that normal life, become more enlightened. That is, find means and capability within the day-to-day life to improve my afterlife potential. So enlightenment is what does that, or what gives that to us, in my understanding. This knowledge base is behind one's eventual, or at least my eventual understanding of the need to be self-aware in the present as often as possible. Now, what that means, and that is actually it's not the culmination, meaning the end, but it is the essential fruit on the tree of knowledge, from my point of view, that is worth working toward. Because if whatever we know and whatever we learn is not contained within present self-awareness in the moment, then it's not alive. We are not alive, in my view. So, for example, most of our attention, most of the time, maybe not most, much of the time, is shifting back and forth between something we remember or something we're imagining. It's usually we're aware of where we are, or we're aware of what we're doing, and at the same time, imagination has our attention going back and forth between the past and the future. So we're not actually presently self-aware in a given moment. Right now, speaking about it makes it easier for us to be more self-aware. I can say you're not aware of yourself. Watching me say that you're not aware of yourself. And you can say, yes, I am, because you have just been made so. And so this happens to us whenever someone or something indicates that we are not all we can be. We defend ourselves. If somebody says, I don't like your shirt, our first response usually is defensive. If somebody says, you should change your hairstyle, or why are you reading that book? We usually have some kind of a disapproval of being questioned, and so we lose sight of the value in that moment of being self-aware in the moment. We're distracted by ego preferences. So in the end of all the knowledge, you can learn about body type, you can learn about alchemy. If you study how many different religions or spiritual venues or esoteric systems, you can study and study and study. It's like having books on a shelf. So if you have books on a shelf, it doesn't mean you've read them. And if you have read them, it doesn't mean that you've applied the knowledge you gained from them to your day-to-day life. So part of what's important to me from the point of view of knowledge acquisition is whether or not I can apply it first and then transfer it to other people if it's of value. So this older system is it's to me pretty factual, and you can add it to Buddhism, you can add it to Christianity, you can add it to an exec trying to run his company, you can add it to the Girl Scouts, you can add it to any church gathering, you can put it in any mosque, and it will always fit with whatever's there because it has always been there. Everybody has a body type. They're carrying it around with them. So whatever they believe, wherever they go, they're taking their body type with them. There are only 7 body types. There are 12 chief features. There are 4 alchemies and 4 centers of focus, centers of gravity. And so those combinations contribute greatly to what we are, what we can do, what we can't do, who we think we are, and so on. And if we don't know that, well, at the same time, I think, well, I'm a Buddhist, or I'm a Jain, or I'm a Catholic. Well, that, yes, and you're a Mars type that's a Catholic, or you're a lunar type that's a Buddhist, or whatever. So knowing, in addition to what you already know about yourself, and those things you believe in, if you knew what your type was, then you would have more understanding of why certain behaviors are there in the same situation over and over again. I mean, there are only 7 types, and everywhere people are being born, they're being born, I mean, not one pure type usually, there's a combination. Across the world, people are being born that are a type. There's not going to be a choice. There's no choice about being a type. We're stuck with being a type. And so it's good to know that. One of the things about it that's generally useful in our understanding of human nature is that history, what we define as human history, keeps coming back to the same thing again and again and again and again. Why is that? Because we seem to be learning nothing from our mistakes, because we keep making them over and over again. Well, the reason, or at least one contributing reason for that, is that types are the same. They're the same types that now as they were 10,000 years ago. So how are we not going to repeat? We would have to be completely different. And in a way, this introduces another topic of interest to me, which is something I call the electrosapien, which in my view is the next iteration of the human evolution. Because if you think about how we function and what we're made of, basically, in a layman's sense, we're a bioelectric system. We're both physical and we're physical and electrical, cellular, and we're electric. And so most of our life as a species has been spent in the cellular side of our potential, from the earliest bipeds till recently. And recently, I mean since the advent of electricity, because as soon as electricity was invented, we have been rushing toward it to do everything possible to get more of it, because we are, in a sense, even more electric than we are water-based. So for us to become more electrically orientated is entirely natural. At the same time, though, it tends to dismiss cellular reality, because electricity doesn't feel pain like we do, or it doesn't register pain like we do if it feels it. So most of our morals, or many of our morals, our points of view, our understanding of life is based on how we react to pain. Like and dislike is a reaction to pain. So electricity just is on or off. It's there or not there. And we are moving toward that state of mind. And it's, in a way, an absence of conscience, as we presently understand conscience to be, because that is based on our sympathy for another person's bodily pain and happiness. And we relate to that because we have the same thing. But when there's less and less body to relate to, which is what it looks like we're headed toward, why I'm calling it the electrosapiens, because the brain, I think, is going to figure out how to remain human in a way, but with a very different body than this one. So evolution revolves around the brain. It doesn't revolve around the body. The body serves the brain in terms of physical orientation and progress. So with electricity now, in everything, we're just becoming more and more embedded in the electric world, which is further separating us further and further from the moral perspectives and conscience that come from a shared, more or less shared understanding of the hindrances of pain. So that's changing, and there will be body parts replaced and so on, to a point, I think, where survival will depend on being less physical, less cellular, because I don't know if we can stop it. We're damaging the earth that we live on. We have always been greedy as a species. We take and take and take, and the resources available to us and what we can manufacture are probably limited. And if we keep taking as we have and functioning as we are, then it's likely in maybe 100 years, 200 years, that the demand on the body in the environment will be such that this body just won't work at all, it will die. It'd be like sending it to Mars. So in order to survive that, I think the brain is going to figure out how to make a new body, and that body will be electrically orientated, I feel, is why I'm calling it electrosapien. And I like using sapien rather than sapiens. It just doesn't sound right, electrosapiens. We're going to be electrosapiens. I mean, I guess you could say it, but I like sapien better. So I use that. But this is a possible scenario based on where we are and how we're made now. And that examination for me is we talked earlier, and I'll go back to it here in a minute. Helpful with graduating scale of vision, because a very frequent condition of the human mind is that we don't think more about what we've already thought about once we define something. So, for example, if I say, well, this is a camera, I'm looking at a camera, so I've defined a camera and looking at a camera. And you have defined on your side looking at someone speaking to a camera. But what if both you're looking at someone speaking and my looking at the camera is quite far from what is actually taking place? It's only a very small part. And it was possible for us, both you on that side and me on this side, to see more and have more life or substance in the place we're in, more awareness of than we have defined our situation to be. This, of course, reintroduces to a certain extent body type, but at the same time, we want to just be thinking more about what we've already thought about. So the point here is that learning is not something. Learning is not a past tense event. Learning is a present tense perspective on how we process life. We're constantly in a state of newness, but we use definition, something already decided, to keep us from actually experiencing that newness. So from my point of view, what I've understood after all my years of study is that we must be self-aware in the present. That is, at the same time that we're aware of where we are and what we're doing, we need to be self-aware of where we are and what we're doing. Oddly, what happens most of the time is that our awareness is on where we are and what we're doing, and not ourselves where we are doing something. So what we want is to include in where we are and what we're doing self-awareness. It may seem like it's already there because it's something we're aware of now, talking about it, but it's generally not there. We're generally not also self-aware when we're aware of where we are and what we're doing. So we want to add that. In adding that, we actually add our life, because living, in my view, can only take place in what we call the present, however we define it or understand it. Has something to do with now, with just whatever and however deep or however wide now is. This is where we want our self-awareness to be. We want it to be here. So if it is here, if we are self-aware, then where we are and what we're doing is a living thing. That is, it is accompanied by presence. Otherwise, it's like a clock clicking through the dial, going through all the numbers, and each number, it doesn't matter. The clock is just doing its routine. It's not aware at any given time that it's a clock clicking away minutes. So we are very much like that also in our programming. We're all programmed by lots of things. And those programs are not questioned by us. So one thought I have that I use a lot is that we must admit at least the possibility that everything we believe to be true is not true. It doesn't mean that some things we believe are not true, or that many things we believe are not true. That's not the point. The point in the admission is to gain more self-awareness, learning new things through being new in the moment, because every moment, in a sense, is connected to every other moment, like every drop in the sea is connected to the sea. So if we can be in one present moment, in that moment we are in all moments. And so that's really big. The present is huge, huge. All present moments are in the present. So when something is past from our point of view, or in the future from our point of view, it hasn't escaped the present to do that. So when we go into the present and are self-aware in the present, we connect to that volume of time and space, let's say. And it's huge. So every moment is new in that way. And if we bring old definitions, old reason, old logic, old beliefs into it without revitalizing them through additional examination and re-examination, then the brain tends to shrink in its perspective on reality. And we have a very small world to live in. So present self-awareness gives us a bigger world, more life. And so greater scale of vision perspectives contribute to understanding that, is why I pursue physics and so many other things on a hobbyist level. But I find the concepts, even the concept of God, is one of our grandest concepts. But if we define that too much through religious practice and behavioral adjustments and so on, and just habituate to the belief, then the belief, in a sense, is past tense and it's no longer alive in us either. So what we want is more life in the life we're living. And from my studies, the essential ingredient in that, from whatever path one has trod to get there, is present self-awareness. Because with present self-awareness, we automatically are in a bigger world than we were aware of a moment before. So physics, a contribution I derived from physics just recently was entanglement. Basically, entanglement means that two particles, however far apart they are, once they are entangled, always remain equal in their response. That is, if you bump one particle, the other particle also moves, and so on. So in this new theory that scientists are working on, astrophysicists I imagine, is that entanglement is an older process than space. So whether or not it's true, we have to wait and see if they can develop the instruments to make that so. But if it's not true, even still, to think on the scale of the universe being driven by entanglement, which is a force older than the space in which we find the universe, that to me is just unbelievable. It's fascinating. And it graduates my scale of vision from Thomas sitting here in the chair talking to you to Thomas sitting here in the chair talking to you, realizing that there's a lot more happening that I also need to be aware of than just you on that side and me on this side. I have been practicing and studying esotericism, what is called esotericism, searching for and digging up and practicing ancient knowledge system ideas for almost 50 years now, I think. And although there's still a great deal for me to learn, what I have understood to be the essential core of the evolutionary process for man and myself and individuals is enlightenment. And enlightenment is essentially being awake in the moment, being self-aware in the moment, moment after moment after moment. And an enlightened person, like let's say Christ or Buddha, was able to be self-aware in the moment frequently, if not constantly. I don't know what happened when they slept at night, but these are examples of people in our history who have achieved enlightenment, and enlightenment refers to that state of presence in us where we are self-aware. So what keeps us from that, from being more self-aware? Because we're not really taught to do this when we're little. We're taught to identify and attach and defend attachment. So for example, I'm given a name, you're given a name when we're born. We are taught to identify with that name, to identify with that culture, to identify with that country, to identify with the food we eat, to identify with the clothes that we wear, and to attach that identity, to attach to that identity, and then to protect it. We are taught this from the time we're little. That does not include being self-aware to it. It only includes being attached. So we need to find ways to free ourselves from that attached identity. It doesn't mean we stop using the identity, but we do want to not be attached to it. Attachment to an identity, to an ego, is sleep. It's not awakening, it's sleep. And the difference between being asleep in that state, that ego state, and being awake to it is an equal difference between being asleep at night and awake during the day. It's extremely different. So when I refer to something, the present being very big, it's an experience when we are awake similar to being awake during the day as compared to being asleep at night. There's much more data coming in. And when we're awake and in the present, we have great detail. If we're in imagination, going backward and forward in time, either in memory or future imagining about what we're going to do or whatever, the detail in the present we're in is very minimal for us, and it's like peripheral vision, kind of. It's just barely there. We know we're in a place doing things, but we're not really aware of the detail. Once we're self-aware at the same time that we're in the place, then massive detail is there, and at the same time, all of what is present begins to become available to us. We can't decipher that. We can only be aware of it. There's no focus of identity per se. It's just awareness of is what happens. And that awareness of is hindered in our progress toward it by ego attachments, which we're programmed with from the time we're little. So we want, in my view, if we want to be human, we have to be more alive. And to be more alive, we need to be more awake. So in a sense, awakening is the most human thing we can do. Yeah.
Cut.
Oh, that's pretty good timing.